Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all saying good morning and just catching up with each other as we go through this. Uh, yeah, what a great day. What a beautiful day. Sun's out and spring is slowly coming. This is the cherry tree in the man's garden. Uh, I've only eaten cherries off it once because I think the birds get to them first. But if I get some, I'm pretty sure we'll share them. Oh. Uh, Good. Well, it's good to see you all. And I've got just a couple of notices before we start. Friday night, this coming Friday night, just watch our Facebook page before that though. But this coming Friday night, we'll be having our pub quiz. And it's great fun. If you would like to join us, I will be updating the information and it will come out probably this afternoon or tomorrow. So that's the pub quiz will be this Friday at 8 p.m. And for those of you who said that last pub quiz was worse than University Challenge, I'll try and make it a bit easier. On Fridays, or the last Friday, we had Richard Michael, the organist, playing some of his some hymns, and it was lovely. If you want to go watch that in the recent videos of Facebook, have a look at that. It's fantastic, and we've had such a good response, and I'm sure if we keep getting a good response, Richard will be playing some more. So just keep looking at that. Then always please tell people about the Facebook channel and they can watch, as well as you can watch the videos retrospectively, so you can watch them on YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel as well as Avatar. We're getting 21st century, so just people can watch them as well. Then just a reminder to keep in contact with each other. Just create a community. We're a good church at community, so just keep that community spirit going. Phone people, make sure people are okay. If you hear of someone that's in a bit of a pickle, please let me know and we'll see what we can do. Don't put yourself in harm's way, but just look out for each other. It's in times like this that we need to do these kind of things, especially. The last thing is thank you, or second last thing, thank you to so many people who have given so generously to the church in the last couple of weeks. We are so grateful for that. We appreciate everything you give. If you can still give by standing order, that'd be great, and we will make sure that you get the information. So we go from there. And then sad news is that some people will know Stan Gibson as a long member of the church. Stan passed away last week, and so we hold him and his family in our prayers, and we think of those people throughout this time that are struggling with death and with loss of family members. Good. So today I'm going to read from a famous passage, and it's quite long, so you'll probably forgive me for the length of it. But it's from Luke, and it's chapter 24, from verse 13 all the way to 35. So get comfortable as we go through this passage. Now on the same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all the things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and beside all this, it is now the third day since things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it was just as the woman had said, but they did not see him. Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near to the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us? That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had made known to them in the breaking of the bread. I love that verse, and I love that passage because it has got such depth and so much place where you can just imagine these two disciples walking on a road. I recently discovered that I love walking, and in South Africa, when I was growing up, you largely took a car to go walking. You didn't really just leave from your house and go for a walk. But in Scotland, and especially here in Kirkcaldy, I feel like we're really close to a lot of good walks. Just a couple of minutes walk and you're into the countryside, and it's just beautiful. One of the things that I discovered when I was walking in this area was the coastal path. And the coastal path was almost like a breath of fresh air for me as I walked it. And my favorite piece of so far of the coastal path is that piece between Petakir Bay and Burnt Island. And when the tide is out, you can walk for miles and miles and miles into the sand, on the sand, and it's just beautiful to get lost in your own thoughts. Before lockdown, once a month, I used to go walking with a good friend, and I found myself often getting wrapped up as I was walking. I got wrapped up either in a story that I wanted to share with the person, or a thought that was going around in my head, or I found myself just getting sometimes wrapped up in just getting to the top of where I needed to be. So often walking was almost just about everything else rather than walking. And when we went to Falkland, there's a lovely walk near Falkland Castle, and I remember getting wrapped up so much in the story that I was busy telling this person that I missed this beautiful scenery. I was so wrapped up in the story that it happened, or just getting something off my chest, that I actually missed the beautiful scenery that was all around me. And I found myself having to remind myself just to stop thinking and look, to see the beauty that was all around me. You have two disciples in the story, and they are walking, but they're also somehow lost in their story. And we get a sort of glimpse into the story about how they're feeling, but you can imagine a bit more of that. It says in the Bible that they're sad, but sad, I think, is just a general encompassing feeling. I think they're struggling with maybe a bit of grief, hopelessness, a bit of anger, maybe some defeat, almost like they've been punched in the stomach. You know that feeling when something happens and it's almost like you've got this weight in your chest, and your stomach starts to turn. And I think that's what happens to these disciples as they're walking on this road. Jesus had come into their lives, and he showed them a new way of living. He showed them that the status quo didn't have to be the status quo. Jesus valued those on the margins, those who society had forgotten. He challenged people to think about how they lived and how their lives affected other people. And he also challenged sin. And when I talk about sin, I don't mean like personal sin. I think sometimes we forget that sin has has structures. We have ways in our society of keeping power in place. And Jesus challenged those to the very heart. And he said that these sins, these structures, are not the destiny of the world. And so Jesus was constantly turning the tables. For these disciples, Jesus showed what love looked like. Or as John says, Jesus put flesh and bone onto the word. This word becomes flesh. And these disciples are not just anybody. They've given their lives to this. They've bought into Jesus' vision. They've seen Jesus like, this is the way we want to live. This is where we want to go. This is the world we want to create. And we're going to give our lives to that. And just like that, the Romans squashed it. Just like in an instant, the Romans go, and it's squashed. And they're left wondering, was it worth following at all? If you've given your life to something and the rug gets pulled out of it, is it worth giving your life to that? And so I think they're left wondering, this question is, which story is more true? Which story has more longevity? And the answer must have been the Romans one. Rome, they've used violence, they've used oppression, they've set up a dog-eat-dog world, and they've won. All our hope is gone. The thing we've given our lives in, well, it's just smoke and mirrors. It's nothing here. And so, no wonder in this story they get caught up in their heads. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of emotions, a lot that takes their attention. And no wonder they don't realize that Jesus is in front of them. And so Jesus meets them on this road, and they say he's a stranger. I have this lovely picture. I'll get it quickly for you. And it sits in my office. I don't know if you can see it. This is my picture. And it's Jesus and the disciples walking on the road to Emmaus. And I absolutely love it. And it's sort of, this morning as I was writing the service, it spoke to me in deep ways, because you can see that the disciples are walking on the road to Emmaus. You can see the glow around Jesus. And you can see the wounds in the hands. And yet the disciples are so caught up in their story that they miss it. They miss it. And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful picture. And if you ever want to find it, it's called The Disciples of Emmaus, and it's painted by the Benedict sisters of Turvey Abbey. And that painting is just a reminder of that walk. What I love about the story is that Jesus doesn't fix things. He doesn't go to the disciples and go straight away, look guys, you've messed up. I'm Jesus, look at my hands, look at, No. He sort of just lets them speak of their experience. He lets them speak of their pain. He lets them share in their hurt. He doesn't tell them off for not getting it. And these disciples on the road say, haven't you heard? I mean, Jesus has heard. Jesus knows. Jesus has a first-hand account of what's happened. Jesus keeps quiet at this moment. And basically what the disciples are saying is, haven't you heard that the status quo is won? Those in power always seem to win, don't they? But we know that Jesus has a lasting impact on these disciples because they see that Jesus is walking on, and they plead with him to come have a meal. They say to him, come and have some food, come rest. And so Jesus had this impact on them because they're not just throwing away strangers, they are embracing them. Strangers aren't people of suspicion. They are this gift from God. And it reminds me a little bit of that verse where, when did we see you hungry or naked? And then Jesus says, when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. On that road, they did it to the least of these, and it ended up being Jesus himself. And so they invite Jesus in for this meal. And Jesus, at this meal, starts to break bread. And in this moment of breaking bread, their eyes are opened. And they see that it's Jesus. And not only do they see it's Jesus, but they realize the story is not over. In fact, the story has just begun. I have another picture in my office, and it's a bit too big to bring out, but it's a picture by Sega Koda of the Last Supper, and around this table is a whole bunch of figures that you wouldn't normally associate with the Lord's Supper. There's a clown, and there's a child. There's all these people that you just don't think would be at the table. And it speaks to me because this is exactly what Jesus did at this moment. The disciples had not seen who Jesus was, and then Jesus breaks bread. Jesus reminds them of the Last Supper. Jesus reminds them of communion. This place where all are welcome. This place where you are fed, not because you are deserving, but because God loves you. This place where you did not grow the grain and you did not grow the grape, but yet you partake in the earth's bounty. You partake in God's grace, God's love, God's affection, and you did nothing to deserve it. Communion for me is a sacred act where we participate, or we take this bread and it feeds us. It goes into our bodies. It nourishes us. It causes our muscles to move. It causes our tongues to speak. It causes our eyes to see. And in the communion act, and I think it's the most profound thing, and it's often the most overlooked, and those of you who know that when we do communion, it's my favorite part, is when we share the peace. It's this moment when we say that just like Jesus, there are no barriers between us. Just like Jesus, our first movement, when we have been nourished and fed, will be not to create division, but to sow unity and peace, to value the stranger, to say that everyone at this table has a place, and even the people I dislike are welcome here. And it's powerful. It is this new way of living, this new understanding of what it means to be in community. And it opens your eyes, doesn't it? It opens your eyes. And so communion becomes this powerful statement of unity. At the communion table, there's no nationalism. There's no class. There's no border control. There's no emotionally stable, or, there's no divisions. All are welcome at that table. All. And when Jesus means all, he means all. And so the disciples know this deep within them because they've seen it, they've experienced it, they know Jesus is about it. And when he does it, when he breaks this bread, it opens their eyes to the reality. It snaps them out of their funk. It snaps them out of their self-centeredness. It snaps them out of their perceived reality. And it says there's a new story unfolding. You've missed it, but now let's participate in it. We have many stories in our world at the moment. Whether it be, or many stories at the moment, and we're all walking on these roads. And maybe you're walking on a road of loss, you know, and you're caught up in your head. And you're caught up on this road and you don't know where it's going to lead or where it's going to go, but you're caught up in it. You're caught up in the road of Corona or COVID-19, and there is a lot to be caught up in that road. I mean, there's hurt and pain, there's fear in that road. Maybe you're caught up in the road of politics. Like even now, we have people giving terrible advice about disinfectants. And locally, we're getting caught up in squabbles. Maybe for some of us, you've lost someone that you love. And that might be a death. Or maybe it's someone that you thought you knew and then they're not the same person you thought you knew. That loss of that person. Maybe it's an anxiety that you carry on this road. Maybe it's a bit of resentment that you're carrying on this road that you're walking. Maybe you too have been punched in the gut. Had your stomach turn, have this weight that's bearing deep within you. And you're getting stuck in the 24-hour news cycle that's in your head. The story of Emmaus reminds us that you can miss the new life that's in front of you, the joy, the beauty, the resurrection that's in front of you. But here's the good news. Jesus walks on these paths with us. And we might not yet recognize it, but there's no condemnation. Jesus doesn't leave us on that path. That's even better news. That Jesus doesn't leave us on these paths, but rather Jesus walks with us and takes us further than we would normally go. He doesn't leave us on this path. Jesus says, tell me your pain and let's walk with it. And the story goes on to new life, doesn't it? Communion, where we are made whole and united with the body of Christ, but not only the body of Christ, but body of everyone. That we are brought back together, that we are united with God, but with each other as well. My experience is often when we're dealing with deep trauma and deep pain, that we struggle to see the hand of the God in that moment. That hindsight is 2020, but so is seeing God's hand in something. It can also be a bit of hindsight. Sometimes seeing the beauty means that we have to walk a few steps forward and look back. Sometimes seeing Jesus walking next to us can only be experienced once we've gone through something.